Okay, so this video is going to start us on the history of sociological thinking and looking at some of the conditions within actual society that really gave birth to the theories and the ideas that we now associate with sociology as a discipline here. So for readings for this week here, there's really two pages in the online text that we're reading here. One is page 1.2, which is the history of sociology. And so I would recommend reading these both kind of at the same time because a lot of some of the people that we'll be introduced to when we look at the history of sociology also are the founders of the original theories of sociology. So that would be the second page here. All right. In terms of boxes in the online reading that you need to read, there are a couple, and you definitely all the boxes for the most part are optional. They give you a little bit more elaboration, application of some of the information that you're reading in each chapter. Some of them are going to be required though. So for this topic, actually this week in particular, this one box, and I believe it is on the last page, so it's page 1.4 on the online textbook there, is I definitely highly would require you to read this because it's a really good example of the application of these different theories that we're looking at to the same, sorts of the same event or issue, which is actually food consumption. And it's a really good, illustration how one thing can be looked at from different perspectives, which are the different theories that we're going to look at. So this box in particular, I would highly recommend. And, let's just say I'm going to require you to read it. So, all right. So this week, we're going to start looking at some of the main sociological theories, the ways sociologists have sought to describe social life and explain it. And we're first going to start by considering how and why sociological thinking emerged. So this is that history of sociology, and we're going to look at who some of the first influential people were in the development of sociology as we use it today. Then we're going to look at the most important explanations for social behavior. And we're going to look at three groups of theories here. Each group has its own set of concepts, own ideas about how and why society works the way that it does. So we'll get introduced to those and look at those differences there. Now, people have thought about society since the beginning of our history, but sociology as a discipline is relatively new, and it emerged, really first with French social thinker Auguste Comte, and who in 1838 coined the term sociology. Sorry, I didn't edit my slides very well, so my goodness. And so Auguste Comte created this term sociology to describe a new way of thinking, a new way of looking at the world that was developing in Western Europe at the time. So again, early 1800s. And the early social thinkers that he wanted to create this new term to sort of reflect, these early social thinkers were emerging in the wake of a significant revolutions and transformations of society in the 1800s. It was the huge changes in the 18th, 19th century Europe, which specifically drove the development of sociology. And your textbook, the online textbook, Little, describes and discusses three major changes that drove the creation of sociology. One is the creation of modern science. The other is the emergence of democratic governments. So specifically, for instance, the revolutions in America and Europe, French Revolution in particular, and the Industrial Revolution. So I'm going to elaborate a little bit on the Industrial Revolution here. Little does a good job of describing modern development of modern science and democracies there, but I want to sort of talk about the Industrial Revolution a little bit more. So But first, it was the development of modern science that really gave rise to scientific discoveries and technological advances, and those were necessary to produce and give it is what eventually gave rise to the Industrial Revolution, because those scientific discoveries and technological advances produce a factory-based industry economy, which then is we associate with the Industrial Revolution. So, with new scientific discoveries, inventors harnessed new sources of energy, so water power, steam power, which were able to operate operate large machines. Also, machines speed up the production of anything, so the production of goods was sped up, and they could produce more and more goods at a faster rate. So as a result, factories became a dominant force and presence in societies. Finished goods were produced in vast quantities and quickly. And so the creation of factories, the creation of more and more goods also then created kind of the capitalistic, exchange of money for goods, economy and social society that we know today. As a result of the growth of and the development of the factory-based industrial economy, urban centers, cities began to grow and grow as people migrated from rural communities into the city in search of work within the factories. So instead of laboring at home on their farms, workers became part of a new industrial workforce, working for strangers, the owners of the factories, and this was a huge and drastic change to the nature of human behavior and existence at the time. So the factory-based dominant urban center city was so very different, obviously, from the rural, small farm, agriculturally based communities from before. And this led to the weakening of and the lessening of the dominance of things like the family and small communities as people moved away from those smaller, communities into the city. The pull of the new industrial labor force meant factory towns grew rapidly into large cities, and a lot of this was positive and good, but at the same time, widespread social problems started to emerge and become a concern for people living in these cities. Widespread social problems like poverty, disease, pollution, crime, homelessness. And so I'll give you a little bit of a kind of a slightly visual depiction of this. This is from a newspaper, an image that was in a newspaper in Canada when Canada went through its Industrial Revolution, which was a little bit after after Europe went through its Industrial Revolution, but very similar sort of effects came out of it. So you see here, there's this image of there you have a city down here on at the bottom, and overpowering, looming over the city, we have this devil. Basically, it's a devil, figure that is looks like wreaking havoc, on the city. You have, he's got like looks like lightning bolts or something like that in his one hand here, and dark clouds, so not pleasant at all. And I don't know if you can see, but on the video here, but on his horns, there are words, and these images that appeared in newspapers from long ago, they always snuck little words into them, and what it says on his horns, it says on the left side one here, it says social, and on the right one it actually says evils. And so this devil feature wreaking havoc on the society, the city below, is reflective of these social evils, these social ills, these problems like poverty and crime and disease that emerged, and they started to see more and more of that as cities started to grow and grow. So that, watching these sorts of negative effects of the advancing societies, watching these social changes and the resulting social crises, the first sociologists began to study and think about society. Some were concerned about the loss of tradition and small communities and attempted to, try and rebuild back up the power and the influence of families and traditional morality. They wanted to figure out how to change societies back because it was better before the Industrial Revolution. Other sociologists grew concerned about the way industrial technology concentrated its wealth in the hands of a small number of people, leaving the workers essentially and those who couldn't find work to starve. So those sociologists sought ways to restructure society so that the wealth maybe was more evenly distributed and the benefits of industrialization was more equally spread out across people in that society. So for the early sociological thinkers like Auguste Comte, but others like Emile Durkheim, Karl Marx, Max Weber, their major goal was to understand how society was actually operating and borrowing from the natural sciences, because remember the emergence of science was also occurring and had also just occurred. So these early sociologists borrowed from the natural sciences the idea of positivism, which is a means to understand the world based on science. And so these early social thinkers sought ways to understand the world through scientific inquiry. They believed that social life easily conformed to patterns and laws and explanations, just like the natural sciences were discovering. And they wanted to use these laws and they wanted to use the identification of patterns of behavior to help solve social problems that they were witnessing in societies as they went through industrial revolution. And the result was the major sociological perspectives that we continue to use today. So before we get to those particular, sociological theories, I think it might be helpful for us to develop a working definition of a theory here, which will then give way to specific sociological theories. So all of us think theoretically, although we're not often aware of it, and we would call it that. We all, for example, seek to make sense of the many events, social situations, and problems, large and small, that we confront in our daily lives. When we attempt to make sense of them, we use language to convey our understanding to others. And this is really just what a theory does. A theory is a set of logically interrelated statements that attempt to describe, explain, predict social events and social issues. It's a statement, a theory is a statement of how and why specific facts are related to each other. So theories have also been described as the stories that we tell each other and that we tell ourselves in an attempt to produce some order in our lives. They allow us to feel as if we know why something is happening and under what conditions it actually might happen again. So individual theories and there's multiple theories that sort of exist out there, but a bit larger in scope than a theory is what we call a perspective. And a perspective is an overall approach to or viewpoint on some subject. A perspective would be like a roadmap of sorts. A perspective also is a collection of theories and theories that share some basic image or understanding of society or assumptions about social life that guide thinking and research within those theories. And so the theories within each perspective, sorry, the theories within each perspective then are going to use the same basic concepts, basic ideas. And this is how we're going to look at theories, sociological theories here in this course and how they're looked at in the reading that you're doing here. So we'll look at three different perspectives. And let's see, actually, I have Little's list here. So this is also from your online reading here. And so Little identifies three perspectives and actually, which are the first column here. Positivist sociology is one perspective, interpretive sociology is another, and critical sociology is a third. And within each of these perspectives, there are more specific theories that and even though the theories are different within each perspective, they have some common shared concepts, assumptions that they all adhere to. And that's sort of what the kind of human interest or purpose column here is meant to sort of illustrate, or what are some of the common things in each of these theories. Now, this list that Little presents to you in the reading is, there's way more theories on here than we are going to be looking at here. So I'll shorten that list here. So we'll look at each of, and I'll have a video on each of the perspectives, the first column here. And then it looks like we're looking really only at two theories, and you only need to learn information for two theories within each perspective. So for the first, positivist sociology, Little talks a little bit about quantitative sociology, as well as structural functionalism. I'll do a video specifically just on structural functionalism here. Then for the second perspective, interpretive sociology, we have symbolic interactionism and social constructivism. And I believe I'm going to talk about both of those in a video. And then finally, we have critical sociology. And here we'll look at a theory that it's called historical materialism. Sometimes it's also called Marxism or conflict theory. And then feminism. Little talks about feminism. I am not going to cover feminism. And the reason is Little does a really good job, and I have nothing different to say than what Little says, or nothing to sort of enhance that. So this will be the next videos here. We'll start in on these specific theories and identifying kind of those key concepts and assumptions and ideas that exist within each and in their look at social life.